Diesel for We the People News. Alright, this video is without prejudice and or without recourse. Okay, not an attorney, not giving legal advice, maybe opinions. That's it, no more, no less. Alright, never look straight forward, always look around you, be able to protect yourself by any means necessary. Sometimes that includes looking up words, people, and find out what the true meanings or definitions. Alright, and this is just a learning video. So just take it as a learning video, because that's what it is. Alright, let's proceed on our learning abilities.
A type of state law, modelled after an Old English law, that requires certain types of contracts to be in writing. US law has adopted a 1677 English law, called the Statute of Frauds, which is a device employed as a defence in a breach of contract lawsuit. Every state has some type of statute of frauds. The law's purpose is to prevent the possibility of a non-existent agreement between two parties being proved by perjury or fraud. This objective is accomplished by prescribing that particular contracts not be enforced unless a written note or memorandum of agreement exists that is signed by the persons bound by the contract's terms or their authorized representatives. The statute of frauds is invoked by a defendant in a breach of contract action. If the defendant can establish that the contract he has failed to perform is legally unenforceable because it has not satisfied the requirement of the statute, then the defendant cannot be liable for its breach. For example, suppose that a plaintiff claims that a defendant agreed to pay her a commission for selling his building. If the defendant can demonstrate that no commission contract was signed, the statute of frauds will prevent the plaintiff from recovering the commission. The English Statute of Frauds, which was enacted by Parliament in 1677, applied to only specific types of contracts. These included promises to a creditor of another to pay the individual's debts when they became due, a marriage contract or promise to marry, other than the mutual promises of a man and woman to wed, a contract for the sale of real estate, and a contract that cannot be performed within 1 year of its formation and has not been completely performed by one side. States have expanded the application of this.
So if you listen to that part of the marriage, right? This is the reason why the 4D is in progress, okay? It's a contract. They're treating it as a contract, and the judge in there is not a judge. It's a mediator, okay? And he gives himself authority to act as a judge. However, the downfall is on that behalf is the 4D contract is only for the Attorney General and the judges and any attorneys involved in this, unless the man or woman voluntarily signs and agrees to that fake judge's terms and orders. Well,
statute to other categories of contracts, such as a life insurance contract that is not to be performed within the lifetime of the person making the promise. It also applies to a contract to bequeath or devise property by will and to a contract that authorizes an agent to sell real property for a commission.
Contract that authorizes to the sell real property for a commission. If you don't pay your property tax, that's exactly what they're doing. They're assuming and presuming that you have signed a contract by your deeds. And because we stay in silent acquiescence and tacit agree to their terms, then we, well, we waive our rights, people. We waive ownership. Because remember one thing. If we have a right to own property and taxes is a privilege, then they down status your property to a privilege and not a right, because they cannot tax rights.
A strict application of the statute of frauds can produce an unjust result. A party who in good faith believes a contract exists and therefore spends time and money to perform the contract.
Unjust results. Is that what happening in divorce courts? Is that what's happening in your speeding tickets? All these things, remember y'all, they tell you you actually have no constitutional rights. Then if you don't have constitutional rights, then what jurisdiction are you in? Contract. Just saying.
Would be unable to force the other party to perform because the agreement was not in writing. Therefore, courts often employ the term part performance to determine whether a plaintiff's conduct based on her belief that a contract exists justifies enforcement of the contract even though it has failed to comply with the statute of frauds. Part performance refers to acts performed by the plaintiff in reliance on the performance of the duties imposed on the defendant by the terms of the contract. The plaintiff's actions must be substantial in order to demonstrate that he actually has relied on the terms of the contract. When the alleged contract involves real property, the acts of taking possession and making part payment, when performed in reliance upon an oral contract under circumstances that clearly show a buyer-seller relationship, are usually sufficient to remove a contract from the requirements of the statute of frauds.
Alright, listen to that little part right there, just that little section. When you make a tax payment, you are agreeing to their terms. Okay? And by the way, for men and women that actually have rights and own property, it's not real property. Real property is a business. Regular property is just property. The property you own that you stand on the ground is just property. Not residential, it's not real property, it's not this all this other secret words. That's where the fraud comes in. Right? If you have rights and you're a man and woman, not a person, and you're led to believe that you are not in contract, therefore that property is property. Not private property, not real property, nothing. It's just a man and woman's property. Trickery of words, y'all. Trickery of words. Which is fraud.
The oral contract, therefore, would be enforced. However, payment or possession alone generally will not suffice to overcome the statute of frauds. Where services have been performed based upon a contract that is unenforceable because of the statute of frauds, the value of those services can nevertheless be recovered on the basis of quantum meruit, or the reasonable value of those services. If a person performs services in reliance on an oral promise that he will inherit certain property and that promise is not fulfilled, that individual can sue the decedent's estate on a quantum meruit basis for the reasonable value of his services. If a contract is unenforceable, a person can recover expenses incurred at the other party's request even though they pertain to the unenforceable contract. The recovery of expenses is not affected because the law...
I'm going to pause right there just for my purposes, okay? I, in fact, need to study this. I have not heard that word. So, I learned something today. I really need to actually research that and find out what that actually means. Some of y'all may know, some of you might not know, but if you don't know, look up that word. Because if it's got to involve in contracts or anything like that, then we must know it.
Implies a promise by the defendant to pay for expenses incurred at her request, and liability is not based upon breach of contract. If one party has performed in reliance on an oral contract and will be irreparably harmed if the contract is not enforced, some courts apply the theory of equitable estoppel to prevent the statute of frauds from being employed as a defense. Equitable estoppel.
Now, that being said, the counties and the cities, they have equity invested on your property. Well, how is that, right? It's taxes. But you agreed to the terms because you pay taxes. So now when they come and get your land, you've been paying taxes, now you're late on your taxes. Well, they have equity invested in your real estate, and it's, so to speak, Okay? Holds that is if a person, y'all, let's stay away from that word. Okay? Look at person in legal definition.
Holds that if a person has so altered his position that justice demands the enforcement of the contract, the court will enforce the contract even though it fails to comply with the statute.
Anyway, there you go. Something that may or may not help you. But what do we know until we try? Right? These We the People News. Bye, y'all. Remember, ignorance is no excuse for the law.